Andre, we did it again in 2018.
Yeah, man.
So why did we do Unity Ride 2018?
As we rode together in 2017, we together learned so much. We grew a lot. And one of the things that I recognized during that was, or I guess I could say that I went back to my childhood and thought about how did I come to this perspective. It didn't come from my childhood. As a matter of fact, the way I was raised was exactly opposite. The people in my neighborhood are racist. That's the way we were raised. It's Tulsa, Oklahoma. The biggest race riot in America happened in my hometown. So in my neighborhood, I was raised to believe that white people were the enemy. Stay away because they only want to get you locked up or, dead. So I have experienced something so much different from that by getting out and living, getting out and forming my own opinions. So what I realize is we all share the same values. We all can produce and change the world, each one of us. So I wanted to bring that value back home, and I wanted to make a film that shows how well we can work together. And I felt the Underground Railroad was a good way to do it. You made a few phone calls, man. Made it happen.
Let's do Unity Ride 2018.
Yes.
2017 was such a huge success, and we had so much fun, and that documentary turned out really well that we decided to do it again.
Yes, sir.
This trip, New Orleans to Toronto, following sights and sounds and meeting people along the way of the Underground Railroad was, I think, a very good way to show the unity that could exist today, that did exist then. There were people that seriously put their lives on the line to help a total stranger get the freedom. And I think as we went along this 30-day journey that we took, it really showed, and it really opened my eyes for sure that it doesn't matter white and black, that white people were helping complete strangers only because it was the right thing to do at their own peril and their own risk of taking their whole family to jail. Yeah. So if they could do that then, why can't we go together and ride bicycles and get along today? It's a very simple premise. So that's, in my idea and estimation, where 2018 came from. I mean, I loved your idea. We had so much fun in 17. We had to do it again. Yeah. And so 2018 kind of came on board of, this is what it's going to be. Because we started literally at the Omni Hotel in the French Quarter, where the slave ships pulled in on the Mississippi River, they unloaded them, and they marched them up the street to be sold.
One of the worst auction blocks ever.
Yeah,
It was horrid.
It was horrid.
But they turned it into a hotel.
Yeah, tell us about the Omni Hotel, man. That was.
I'll tell you what.
I'm getting chill bumps thinking about that. That was pretty cool.
The Omni Hotel, I guess the main thing I took away from them is, I'll back up a little bit. It used to, what was it called? Something exchange.
The New Orleans Slave Exchange.
Slave Exchange. Right. And this was posted, or I guess pressed into the cement.
On the side of the building.
On the side of the building. Yeah. So, of course, once life changed, they let that building fall apart, but there were still parts of that building left. And they rebuilt this Omni Hotel on that site. And there was one piece of that word, or that title.
Title on the outside of that
that
building.
Was left. And tell us what that word was.
The word was change. So this was a site that used to be a slave trading block that had withered away over the years. And when they went to rebuild the hotel, the only wall that could be salvaged, and the only part of that wall that could be salvaged, the word change was on the wall. And
so they kept it.
Very symbolic, and they kept it. And they're actually proud of that they kept that word change. Knowing their history, they didn't hide from their history. Like, this happened on our site. It happened.
They've changed all the other parts of the world.
Yeah, and that word change stayed. That was a really good way to get this whole trip started. Like, we're trying to change as well, and that was a really good way to get going.
Like really, the whole trip. This 1.2 miles was the hardest part of the whole trip today. I ain't do that much better. Dude, I kept getting sick with the smog. All that smog and shit we came to, all them factories. I was sick at the stomach for like 2.5 hours.
Got bearing straight, man. We'd like to sit down and get some more input on how we can really improve, because that's pretty much it right here. I mean, this is pretty much a normal day for the next 35 days.
We left there. You remember Whitney Plantation?
I do remember Whitney Plantation. Long day on a bike to get there. But Whitney was, the first foray into plantation life. As we mentioned, we're going to start this journey. We're going to start from the slave block to the plantation and then on to Canada. That's really what we were trying to do, was follow what would have been done then.
Yes.
So you got sold, you got bought, you go to a plantation.
Yes.
And I think Whitney was a really good look into plantation life.
Man, it was. We learned about slaves who tried to overthrow their slave owners, and they were caught and beheaded, heads put on stakes for the rest of the slaves to see. It was just horrid. Of course, this is not what we were hoping to be talking about, I believe, or I'm sorry, focusing on, I should say, in going into this, because we wanted to focus so much on love and help. But
right.
we had to tell this part of the story.
It's a story, man. I mean, the whole slavery, the whole functionality of slavery was awful. Yeah. I mean, it was horrible. And so I think learning that starting from the time, like you see the plaques in New Orleans, like this is where slave ships pulled up and they were marched 3 blocks up the street. And you can put yourself in that situation, and then you put yourself in a situation on a plantation,
yes.
and you can see it. It really does give you an understanding of what they went through.
One of the longest running plantations we've heard of.
Up to the 70s, it was still operational.
Yes, so, and we met one of the descendants.
Right, of the family that was there.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, that was good. That was very, it was inspirational to talk to her.
Right.
She was so knowledgeable about the life there, about her family. We appreciate her.
Yeah, that was really good. Whitney was a really good experience to really get the trip kicked off as a whole, to really figure out what we're getting ourselves into.
Yeah.
Like really put yourself in that mindset of, now we got to get out of here. And granted, we did it on a bicycle, but now they're trying to do it, on foot through the swamps. I mean, we're riding through all the swamps and crossing the rivers, and
it's so hot.
It was so hot. So trying to put yourself in that situation, how they felt, and trying to get through that was a really good way to get our journey started.
It was. Natchez, Mississippi. I didn't have a lot of experiences. I believe I was starting to get sick at that point.
Yeah, you're probably getting sick at that point. I do the term, and I do remember learning this in Natchez, Mississippi, was down the river. Don't send me down the river, because if you were a slave and you were up north in Tennessee or Kentucky, you wanted to stay there because your chance of getting freedom was a little bit better. You get sent down the river, which means down the Mississippi River to the deep south, your chances of getting out were pretty much eliminated. So we learned about that in Natchez for sure. The biggest thing that I took, we went to the Underground Railroad Museum that we went to, the Slavery Museum. And then as we were leaving out on bikes through town, you had gotten a little bit ahead of me. And I saw a sign that was talking about where the slave block used to be, where the trade block used to be. And they maintained that park there. And it's pretty much right in the city of Natchez. It was right there as we were going out of town. And I stopped just to kind of look at it. And as I was sitting there walking through, reading the signs and looking at the pictures and understanding this was outside slave block. So New Orleans was indoors. This one was outside. I mean, they roped them up from the river and they took them here, and it was an outdoor area where human beings were bought and sold.
And it's hot.
And it's hot.
Oh.
It was very hot. But one thing I looked at, and I remember thinking as we were there, was that across the street, this was in 2018, there was 2 black gentlemen working on a car outside in the driveway. And it really put in perspective that there has been a lot of progress made. What happened in the 1840s and 50s and 60s was awful, but there has been progress made because these guys are right across the street from their ancestors being bought and sold, and they're working on a car. So that is something to look at and say we have come a long way. And so that was something that I looked at during that experience was, yes, this was awful, but we have moved on, and now there's people outside working on the car.
Yeah. We're still facing racial issues in our country.
Of course.
Yes, we do have to acknowledge where we've come from.
Right.
We have to appreciate that if we want to continue to make progress.
If you want to continue to grow. I completely agree.
I like it. We found ourselves in Jones County. Tell us about Jones County.
Jones County. So we made it up through New Orleans, up to Natchez, and now we're still in southern Mississippi in Laurel. So the story of Newton Knight actually got put in a film through Hollywood with Matthew McConaughey in a movie called The Free State of Jones. So we really had to go through here because it truly was a story.
Yes.
In the Deep South, the slaves a lot of times were on their own trying to get to freedom. There were pockets, and Newton Knight and his family were one of those pockets. What we found out that Newton Knight was a white guy, and he had went off to actually fight for the Confederacy, and word was starting getting back to him while he was in the field that the Confederate Army was coming through and basically raiding his town. So women and children were pretty much left to fend for themselves as the Confederate Army came through and took everything.
His hometown.
His hometown, right, back in Laurel in Jones County. So Newton said, I'm not fighting this rich white man's war anymore, I'm going home. So he basically deserted, but when he got home, he went a step further and went to the courthouse and kicked everybody out and raised his own flag and said, this is now my free state. So Newton Knight was a bad man. He said, no, you guys get out. This is a free state now. This was the Free State of Jones. And basically welcomed everybody.
Any slave that may have
On the
escaped.
way, it doesn't matter, anybody, he didn't care. Everybody was welcome. Yes. We ended up meeting descendants because it turns out Newton actually married a black lady and a white lady.
Yes.
And so he had 2 families that lived on the same compound.
Yes.
That from every indication, they all got along just fine.
So these families still work together.
They still work together. So we were able to meet his descendants, and actually were fortunate enough that was the day they were going to clean his grave.
Yes.
And went up to his grave site up in the hills of southern Mississippi, down that long dirt road.
Yes.
But they were very warm and so welcoming people that were so excited to tell their story. It's like, yes, this was my great-great-great-grandfather on my great-great-grandmother's Rachel's side, and they did such a good job of telling their story. And I'm very proud of it.
Yes.
This was our history in this pockets of southern Mississippi. This is what happened.
Yeah. They were warm people. I got to agree with you there. They kept checking on me. I was a little sick.
Right, yeah, you were a little sick in the car.
I really didn't get to experience much of it, and it really had me upset that I didn't get to experience much. I wanted to be out there, but you all really did a good job helping them clean the
that was a good experience. But I just watching that story unfold, and this man just said, this is ridiculous. I'm not doing this. I'm going home, and I'm just going to take over and start my own country, and you guys can do whatever it is you do, but don't come in here. evaded the Confederate Army for years or months while they were trying to find him, and they never did. And then once the war was over, he continued on and helped a lot of people.
Yeah, great guy.
Black, white. I mean, he just didn't care. He helped a lot of people.
Well, did he like shoot the governor or something
Shot
like that?
the mayor of Laurel or Jones County, or whatever that county was called, and that's he shot the mayor.
And that's how he
took it over. Right? Yeah, he actually took it over. So yeah, Newton Knight was a bad guy doing this anymore. This is ridiculous. So that was a really cool part of that trip to learn a little bit more about his story.
Yes, yes. So about 300 miles in, we find ourselves at where?
Selma, Alabama.
Oh my goodness.
Ground zero. I do think, and granted that Selma really wasn't part of the slave routes that we could find. Obviously, there's probably some history there.
Yeah.
From its history, from the Civil Rights Movement and Bloody Sunday and Dr. King and the Pettus Bridge and all of that history, I think we had to go through there.
I can agree.
We're too close not to. Because to me, Selma was probably one of the most eye-opening parts of the whole entire trip. It's just what that city is still struggling with to this day is still pretty eye-opening.
I agree. So we went to the radio station and we went to a couple radio stations actually. And they both were very good experiences.
Right, they were, yeah.
In their own way.
Right.
The first one, man, it got pretty interesting inside of that one, didn't it?
It did. You can remember we were there the day after the primary election, and we were on a radio show that's politically based, and they're very welcoming. I mean, very warm, and it was very, very good experience.
We told a story.
Yeah, we told them a story
that we had just did a trip together, last year.
Right.
That was politically based.
Right.
You being more conservative, me being more liberal, across the country together. I'm sorry. And we made a film about it that was hoping to inspire, and help people understand that two people can make a goal and get there. That was the point of it, and they accepted that.
I think they were receptive of that part of it. I think they were very receptive of us, and they're very encouraging. The young guy wrote the newspaper article about us.
Yes, that's right.
But I think what I took back from Selma, and Selma's still a very segregated town. That's just what I took away, and it's just an opinion.
Our experiences in Selma.
Yeah, Selma was something to remember, and Selma, down to beautiful little city right by the river. But it was very eye-opening to there's still a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And I think that it's, you just keep plugging away. But it was a very good experience to go through there. But there's still a lot of work to do.
Well, you know what we say. We're going to talk about it. If we're going to talk about it, might as well do something about it, right?
Might as well do something about it, that's right.
That's it. After Selma, that very eye-opening experience.
Eye-opening experience. That's a good way to put that.
We got to cross the Pettus Bridge.
We did. We crossed that bridge, very historical bridge, and then went north to Montgomery. Montgomery would have been very uneventful. It was actually just a stopover night.
We planned.
We planned to have a stopover night in Montgomery, but it didn't quite turn out that way.
We stopped to get our bikes checked on.
Yes.
But we stopped at that bike shop and they looked out for us.
Oh yes, the shoes they gave us and the clothes and the
towels.
That guy, he was fantastic.
I still wear those compression socks, man.
Compression socks and the shoes. Monty and David walked away with about 4 pairs of shoes apiece, I think, man. All them shoes they gave us and the towels and the socks. And
they were awesome.
I forgot about those guys. Yeah, they were fantastic.
Yeah. Great way to start out our trip in Montgomery, but man, did it change by that night.
Set up in the campsite like we've done all through 2017, all this trip. I mean, we stay in campsites. It's very safe. You just don't think much about it. Yeah. So we go to bed just like a normal night. And as you know,
I wake up to...
Somebody fucking stole my bike.
Do we call the police first? That bike's here. Ours are gone.
Where's Andre?
He just took off that one on his bike. Woke him up first. Alright.
Not that bike, honey. Not that bike, dude. Not that bike.
One of these hotels is gonna get in.
issue. Both of them got cameras, but they will not search their cameras without the police making them search their cameras.
And I had a touring bike stolen. I've ridden this bike cross country 3 times. It's a very sentimental bike, but stolen out of the RV park this morning.
I got a tip on where at least one of the bikes are.
Okay.
We need the police.
Okay, they're coming.
Yeah.
I thought this was your computer.
No. That's the issue. You got 2 of them stolen. Which one is the one that's over there?
Say that again.
So he described Jonathan's bike,
Right.
and he said, I know that guy didn't need to be riding it because he's a crackhead. I know he can't afford it. But the way then he started going into, well, if I find it for you, what can you give me? So that made me immediately think, oh, this guy fucking is either ends with somebody who stole it, or he stole it himself and wants to make sure he gets a reward before he, pulls it out.
Right.
So I need to go post up at that Key West and make sure. I got to go back there now.
I'm on my way.
It's like one of the last hotels. It's the next to last hotel on the right before you get to the bridge.
Say that, James.
Andre's on his way.
I'll meet Andre there. Perfect.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Wagon is trucking by the ship. There it is. In the bushes. That's some shit.
Only way you're going to get some money out of us is if you help us find the other bike.
Yeah, I agree.
Period. Where you at? I'll come to you. All right, I'll be right there. I'll be right there. Yeah, got them bikes back, God dang it. We get all our bikes back.
We got.
This ain't the first loss we didn't have to recover.
No.
This ain't the first one.
Take you for a ride. After a very emotional 2 days from Selma to Montgomery, we go back by that great bike shop, and they helped us get our bikes back tuned up again and ready to go. Moved on to Birmingham, from Montgomery to Birmingham. And I think this is where the Underground Railroad was really starting to take shape with the people that we really started to talk to, because you had a great conversation with the 2 Quaker ladies. They were more religious based, helping people just for the humanity part of it. But you learned a lot of things about the Quakers in that story as well.
I did. I would say one of the most important things today that I learned was that they are still at work today.
Correct,
they are
yeah.
still getting involved in human trafficking. They are still involved in making a difference today. It really inspired me, and it inspired me more later, but we learned the most amazing thing for me. Did you know?
I didn't know. I had no idea. Yeah.
So we learned that there were certain sects of Quakers that owned slaves.
Yeah. No idea.
I always understood Quakers as a group of people, or
Right, almost like pacifists.
yes,
Right,
that were helpers of slaves. But I do. They did say that for the most part, if they owned slaves, it was a better way of living.
Right, it was
than-
more the house servant, not
Yes.
field slave.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So that was a really good experience. That conversation went a lot of different directions. We got talking about civil rights, and we got talking about the '60s, and
Yeah.
a really good conversation though.
They said they were not that far south back in the
Right,
time of
right,
the Underground
yeah,
Railroad.
yeah.
Though they said they started migrating a little further south a lot later.
Right.
But they were very informational. They knew a lot about the area, and kind of the story of Quakers, and it was really nice to get that story.
Right. Yeah. It was really nice. Very nice people.
Yes, they were.
Trying to get from Birmingham to Huntsville, long couple days of riding.
Yeah. Woo.
So Huntsville, again, it started really showing where the history of the Underground Railroad was even more so starting to take place. Because now you get to Huntsville and they have a modern day reenactment
Yes.
on top of the mountain there, which was really neat. I mean, we got to be runaways, and we got to we got to participate in the movement. I did. Yeah, it was meant for 6-year-olds, but it was fun though.
It was. I really enjoyed it.
It was really cool, man. It was a really cool experience. It was a lot of fun.
We had the little rug that was
Right, yeah,
was
we had
painted
the
into what is that? You got your trailer, horse and trailer,
horse and buggy, and
yes.
all that kind of, we had to hide underneath.
So we had to hide
Yeah, we had to hide
underneath.
underneath.
It was so.
It was fun.
It was
though. I mean, it was very,
fun.
it was really cool to see what they're doing up there because they, the period cabins and the period clothes, and they're taking these children and they're teaching them about what the Underground Railroad really was about.
Yeah.
And they did a really good job of that. They talked about John Rankin, who we learned a lot more about when we got to Ohio.
Yes.
Which I didn't really know a whole lot about his story. We kind of started seeing that unfold in Huntsville. It was a really cool little stop. Bird on the Mountain. So I think that was the name of it. But and I hate about all these names because we met so many people, went to so many places, so it's hard to remember all of it. But Huntsville was a lot of fun.
It was, man.
Just a little.
Yeah. So this was the time that we started finding it.
Yeah, it was really cool to be up there and to kind of experience that.
It was. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Our schedule kind of changed.
A little bit.
Tell us what you did to us.
So
Jonathan.
yeah, I kind of played a ruse. Me and Justin kind of we got together and just kind of understand that we were probably about 2 weeks in at this point, and we're all tired, and it's been a long trip and all the many miles, and a lot. And then obviously we learned and immersed ourselves. It's a very heavy topics, a very heavy subject matter, talking about slavery and the human condition and the Underground Railroad. So it was a lot. It was a lot to handle, and okay, we're all tired. I think it's time to take a break. We're going to Chattanooga. We're going to drink some beer. We're going to hang out for a little while. We're going to have a little bit of fun, and then we're going to come back tomorrow, and we're going to get back on these bikes. So y'all ready to do that? Is that cool? Is that good?
Go, man.
All right, let's go.
Because to open the show, we've got a great trio for you. Out of Knoxville, Tennessee, we would like to welcome Miracle Moon, and they're going to be backed up by the big-ass Happy Family Orchestra. Let's give them a big, warm Chattanooga welcome tonight.
So basically, the surprise was that we're going to go to the Riverbend Music Festival in Chattanooga, which was about an hour and a half drive away.
Yes.
And so we went and see our dear friend, Amanda Fox and her band, Marigold Moon, and a lot of Knoxville friends were there.
Yes.
And it was a really good diversion to kind of get away.
We're headed to Nashville.
Correct, yeah. We left Huntsville basically and going to Nashville.
Around about Columbia, I suppose.
About Columbia, yeah. Going to Matt's parents' house that morning.
Now we can watch the clouds go by or go away as we watch them come in. You know what I'm saying?
Damn, this is a steep ass road.
My helmet saved my life.
It's raining, it's wet, and Andre took a little spill. These roads are really windy. We were coming down a crazy downhill right there, and he might have took a little bit too fast on these wet roads and ended up in that ditch right there with probably a broken collarbone. So it's dangerous out here, man. You gotta be careful, gotta be mindful of where you are, and just keep pushing down. That's it. So get him healed up, keep on riding. That's all we can do.
I knew it as soon as I came across that hill with too much speed. I was going way too fast. As soon as I saw the wet road,
Right.
it was like, oh, it's over.
Yeah, this
You
is
know,
not gonna be good.
so instantly I'm thinking, are you going to fall left or are you going to fall right?
Yeah, you broke your collarbone.
Second time.
Second time. So I come down the hill and you were in a lot of pain. It was no denying that you were not very happy at the moment. I was like, man, this is bad.
Yeah, so I had to take a week off. That was the worst week of the ride for me.
Oh, I can imagine.
Oh, I was devastated.
Justin held it down though.
Oh, man.
Justin held it down. Me and Justin rode for that week to Knoxville. Justin held it down though.
Seeing Justin riding with you and seeing him push those miles
Justin held it down.
made it better. It definitely made it better for me. He came in so happy that he was able to get as many miles as he was able to get every
Justin was
day.
ready.
That made it all worth it for me, for sure.
Justin, I mean, that's so funny. His 27-year-old self and weighs 140 pounds maybe, and we'd climb them long climbs up there, and I get up there to stop my heart rate. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna calm down. I look behind me, and Justin's lighting a cigarette, and I'm like, dude, I'm dying up here, man. You back there smoking a cigarette.
But that's it, man. Yeah. We always like to add Knoxville to our trips. It really does make our trips like so much better to come home during them and get to see all our friends and try to do a little ride with them, hang out. That was great. But we got to Knoxville this year and we added somebody to the trip.
Well, we get to Knoxville, and Doug joined us in Knoxville.
Yes.
And Doug has been a dear friend for about 10 years now, and Doug is a historian, and so he really understands the true impact of what we were doing. And not only is he an historian, he was helping us formulate the trip and formulate the route and formulate the ride and understanding where we're going and giving us a lot of back history, trying to get us through the Deep South and my aggravations of we're not really doing Underground Railroad stuff. And he's like, because there's not any. It's like, okay. So now we're starting to get to Knoxville, and it's really starting to take shape.
We get to Knoxville and our buddy
We pick up
Doug
another
joins
one.
us. Man, how was it? How does
Doug
it
in the
feel to have done your first bike trip, Doug?
It was great. It proved a lot that a fat boy can ride a bike.
You did fantastic on the bike, man. That was great. That was cool.
You really did, man. I really appreciate all the work you did to help us design this trip, and yeah, thanks for all the hard work, really. Did you enjoy it?
Man, most influential thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you know, the first half of the trip, you know, my girlfriend Nelly and I were just calling and trying to find places for you guys, and then wanting the pictures, wanting to see your development. So seeing that part of it, and then getting on the bike, and then being a part of it was pretty amazing.
I remember the conversations you had with Nelia once you got in it with us. Like, now I understand why they don't send pictures all day. Now I understand they got a lot going on. And so, I mean, you're on the bike, you're tired. Plus, you're making a film, and we was a lot going on.
It's a lot.
It was a lot.
And after a while, you're tired of the camera. But moving on.
Yeah, after a while, you like put that camera down. But
The camera on my face.
Yes. So we leave Knoxville. Doug is with us, and we stop through Friendsville. Friendsville, I really loved Friendsville. It really changed me a lot. We had already met the Quakers in
Birmingham.
I'm sorry. So we had met them, but this was our first experience with a real place where we know real things.
Right, we know real things are starting to happen.
With this Quaker community. So much so that they named the town after it, I suppose. So we move on from there.
Back up a little bit. So Friendsville, the Crescent Bend House in Knoxville, and the house at Frozen Head State Park. So Doug can tell us a little bit about the Crescent Bend House and how that came
Yeah, so Crescent Bend was really cool. So major house in a, upscale neighborhood in Knoxville. And the owner of the house was a slave owner, and he had 2 sons. And so when he passed, he left both of those sons property.
And these 2 sons were complete opposites, right?
Complete opposite. One was a slave catcher, and the other one was running slaves on the Underground Railroad through his house. So, that I think that was a great place for me to join. Was a cool story like that.
Learning how, and getting that basement, really learning how to do it.
Now we were told that this was a rumored story, so we're not sure. It's like a possibility that the rooms in these homes were used. There is that possibility, and there are words around town that make people believe that this was a possibility, which is why we ended up doing research on these places and going to these places.
Yeah, so if you look at the history and you look at how a slave would theoretically leave Tennessee, they're going to try to make it to Kentucky, and then they're going to try to make it to Ohio.
Right, and they're going to follow the river.
That place is on the river. It just made sense, and those tales came from the family.
Yes.
So
yes.
Probably pretty true.
Frozen Head State Park, man.
Stumbled upon that one. Maybe talk to the park ranger guy and tell them what we were doing. And we stopped at that campground before we got to Knoxville, told them what we were doing, and then this was really eye-opening about how we're trying to make a film, because we had this really cool spot, and this guy was like, we are 90% positive it was an Underground Railroad site, not confirmed, but we're pretty sure, but you can't film there because it's owned by the state of Tennessee. So we had to go through the whole entire filming rights.
And of course, we are so amateur.
On the weekend, and this lady, she was fantastic at the Tennessee Film Commission, though.
She was.
No idea, can't remember her name, though. She was phenomenal about trying to help us. She was like, I love what you guys are doing. This is great. We want to film this place, but we got to get it approved. So we had to get insurance, we had to get all these things, and it was on a Friday afternoon. She really helped us get that done.
But this was exactly that. We're just sharing our story, telling people why we're doing what we're doing and what we're doing, and they're like, "Hey, I know of a place.
I know a place over here."
Yes. So that was a great find. That was a wonderful part of our trip.
And we got approved to go in the house and film. So it was really cool walking in those hidden rooms, because even at the Crescent Bend house, I mean, you could tell these were hidden rooms in these houses.
It was absolutely hidden rooms. So, of course, in the Crescent Bend house, we have the whole Civil War history. So it's a possibility it could have been just for hiding soldiers.
Right.
Possibility.
Right.
But more than likely, we know why they had those hidden rooms. The same with the one at Frozen Head State Park. When we go upstairs, you had to go upstairs to the top floor, and there was a hidden or false wall.
The wall. Yeah, the wall opened up that little tiny room. Pitch dark, cool. Perfect hiding spot.
Yes, it was the coolest spot in the house. Of course, you don't have any air conditioner or anything like that, and it was hot. I mean, we're talking East Tennessee.
Right.
So it was they chose the coolest place of the house
Put 'em in there.
for them to be able to hide. And I mean, that was touching. I got chills when I walked inside of that room.
I would agree.
I was inspired by the love that had to exist for people of that class to help people who are suffering so bad. I think that's when it started really coming home, you know.
And I think that house, 1814, 1815,
18, right.
something
Early
like that.
1800s.
Early
Yeah,
1800s. So you
early
got to understand, you go from Crescent Bend to that house, you're probably talking about the only houses of that size at that particular time
Right.
built that large. So it made sense that would be the next spot.
Right.
It made sense that, okay, you got to get to this house.
Right.
You follow the river to here. You can follow the river all the way to the next spot. Everywhere we went, there's water. And so that for a slave, a fugitive slave, they've got to follow some kind of landmarks to get to the next spot.
Makes perfect sense.
All day.
Literally.
Took about 4 minutes to get down.
That's it. Literally all day. Just had to keep stopping, and then 4 minutes after, all over.
From Knoxville, we head towards Louisville. Doug, tell us about Louisville.
So Louisville, I think you guys saw the plaque.
Saw the plaque,
And it's Lucy and Thornton Blackburn plaque to fugitive slaves, right? But the importance of them is, we didn't know this at the time, but as we're traveling, Lucy and Thornton Blackburn began their fugitive slave route in Louisville. That's when they started to escape, and they got to Detroit. And they were actually captured, turned into a big court case, and that court case is what made the Underground Railroad popular to slaves. It put a name. Prior to that, the Underground Railroad was just something you did. There was no name. You just knew someone could help you get free. But their court case allowed the Underground Railroad to be popular, and that's when Canada, as a country, said, "Hey, if you get to Canada, you get to this soil, you're free." But their court case allowed the Underground Railroad to be popular, and that's when Canada, as a country, said, "Hey, if you get to Canada, you get to this soil, you're free."
So that's when it became official that Canada was the promised land.
Canada was the
Yeah, that became the North Star. That became the North Star.
I love that. I love that.
I feel so much better than I thought I would. Yeah.
It's like 18 miles though.
Quick. You got here way faster.
Way faster.
One of my favorite places in the Unity Ride 2018 was Ripley, Ohio.
We leave Louisville, we're riding, it was probably about 2 days, I guess, and we crossed the Ohio River, which was free territory. And we get back in Union territory now. So if you separate our country, the Ohio River separated it. Kentucky was Confederate slave states, Ohio was free Union states. So Ohio River separated it. We get across the river, we get on bikes, and we take off. And we're riding up that highway. We hadn't been on a bike for like maybe 10 miles.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you start seeing the brown historical marker signs that said Underground Railroad signs, and they're everywhere. You're like, holy cow, it's like opened up like 10 miles ago in Kentucky. There's nothing. It's hidden. It's erased. Nobody wants to talk about it. It's gone.
Our whole trip, we had seen nothing about an
cross
underground
over
road.
Ohio River, and we're making that trip to Ripley because there's a huge historical significance of Ripley with John Rankin and John Parker. And so we're going there. That's our destination to get to Ripley. And every one of these little towns had all these Underground Railroad sites though, over and over and over again. And we finally get to Ripley. I was like, we're staying here for at least 2 days to kind of go through all of this.
We're
'cause
feeling
it was
like,
overwhelming. Once it like really opened up, it was like, wow, this is crazy.
I'm happy.
Yeah, you got happy.
Because you guys got happy. We finally were
Finally, this is it.
seeing
All right.
something come to
Finally
fruition.
start seeing all these historical markers in these little small towns. And like,
Yeah.
I don't even remember the names of the first couple of towns we went to. It wasn't Ripley, it was like the other small towns along the river. Like every house in there had an Underground Railroad plaque on it. And remember the guy at the sports bar was talking to us?
Yes.
He's like, oh, go up here. And this is a spot over here.
And before we could go there, that's information.
Right, yeah,
the
they
one
told
thing
us
that
too,
happened
yeah.
when we got across, once we got across that river, the one thing that happened is everyone we met
pointing us to somewhere else, right,
embraced
yeah, they was
the
pointing us
Underground
to
Railroad.
another
They
spot,
had
yeah.
they had so much history to share.
Right, they were sending us to
Everyone
another
knew
spot.
a part of the Underground Railroad.
Right.
It was like a completely different
Right.
world. It was. Oh my goodness! So, what else? What else you remember about Ripley, Ohio? What stands out
I
to you?
remember Ripley was like the most eye-opening part of that whole trip. Just the people, first of all. Like I said, we decided to take a day off, so we knew we weren't gonna ride the next day. So we did the boat ride, and we hung out with the people at the little restaurant, and all the history stuff that we learned. And I mean, just
Doug's
great
famous
night.
word. We got Doug's famous words.
Yeah,
And everybody was so welcoming. You know,
yes, that whole time.
that's
Dying
the
to
thing
everybody.
that was so cool. And that's when I've asked somebody, hey,
Hey,
can
you
you
mind?
take us on a ride? I mean, we've been riding bikes and we're tired. And I'm like, yeah.
Come on,
And
we
everybody
got beer,
believed,
man.
everybody embraced the story. The
Right,
entire,
yeah.
literally the entire town.
Yes.
That was amazing to me. I've never
Yeah, the
seen
whole entire,
that
everybody did.
ever.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, you guys
was-
need to go over here, go over there. And this tree over here, my granddaddy said this was over here.
I was
It was very eye-opening.
absolutely emotional almost the whole time of Ripley, Ohio, because of that exact thing.
Right.
Everyone was so helpful. It's like the love of the Underground Railroad was so powerful in that place that it still existed.
Right.
You know, that love still existed there. And of course, that's exactly what we're wanting to show in this film, is that love still exists today.
And it's weird, the name started coming back.
Yes.
You know, you talked about John Rankin.
Right, yeah, John
So
Rankin.
we learned
Right there,
his
right
whole
there,
story.
his whole story, and John
And,
Parker was right
you
there.
know, and then we learned about John P. Parker, who's most people probably don't know much
Right,
about. So you have the fugitive slave who got free, became a millionaire, an industrialist,
John Parker.
but John Parker. And then you have John Rankin, who freed over 2,000 slaves.
Right.
Yeah.
Right there in the little tiny
Right
little
there, and these
community,
two
basically.
cats
Right,
knew
yeah.
each other.
Right, yeah.
You know, and so that just was the culmination of all the research we had done, and then we're physically there, and we're really learning all the details.
Yes.
It's amazing, and Ripley is the reason why the museum exists in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
They came to Ripley to get their information.
Okay.
So that was cool.
Well, you know, so John Rankin became kind of one of my first heroes during this trip. And it was because I guess I think it was more of a community effect, though. They had a strong union in Ripley. They were really organized.
Right.
And so this is where we started learning where the name Underground Railroad came from, right? It's because the railroad was the big hot thing
Right.
in America at the time. And so they would talk in code to each other. If you were, tell us about the positions, Doug. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Ripley was amazing. I didn't know this either prior to getting there, was this word extractors.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So a conductor, if you look at a train conductor just passes out tickets. They don't move. They're just a conductor. They're
Right.
just giving out information. An extractor is actually going
Going
somewhere.
there and pulling people out.
Right? And so they had this term in an article that we looked up in the library and said, oh, well, John Parker was an extractor and John Rankin was a conductor. And I was like, well, what's an extractor? And he was like, oh, he went across the river, physically got slaves, and passed them on to John Rankin so they could go on further north. That, to me, is a different context than a conductor.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
No less dangerous, but you're going into slave territory to get
To
slaves.
pull people
And then
out.
when you talk about Harriet Tubman, I
She
could
was
never.
an extractor.
She was an extractor. And She
Yes.
went into the deep south and came back. So I
Yes.
thought that is something that's eye-opening. And why are we not learning that in school?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So they had these positions that like Rankin being a conductor, I can say, Jonathan, I need you to go and see the conductor and let him know I have 5 packages.
Right. And that's how the people came.
Yeah.
And we can talk. We can talk like this right in front of a slave catcher because he don't understand what we're
Right.
talking about. And so that's where the name Underground Railroad came from. Is because they spoke in code using railroad terms. And I didn't know that. I'll be honest. I did not know that. I thought the Underground Railroad was a bunch of different routes that they
Right.
took. And that was eye-opening for me. Ripley, Ohio, kind of opened that door for me, and wow, it blew me away. Like that was when I really became emotional during this trip and felt like, wow, this, I may just
Right,
be,
this is right.
I
Yeah,
may
this is
be
right.
able to make that film
Right, yeah.
that I really wanted to accomplish.
Yeah, they had abolitionist societies.
Yes.
And these people were not these were the elites.
Yeah.
These were multimillionaires. They could finance it. They could finance trips to. They actually raised money to send Josiah Henson to Britain to meet
Yes.
with Queen Victoria.
Yes.
So you got an infrastructure of money, resources to make the Underground Railroad movement work.
And they were smart.
That's interesting.
They were so smart. They not only did they have the casket maker right on the river where people could quickly
Right,
go from the
quickly go
river
underneath,
to
right.
go right into his
Right,
place.
bottom of
But
the casket,
they
right.
also bought. So John Rankin's house. It was the house on the hill.
It was
the
the
house
light
that-
on, they had the light off. If the light was
Yes.
on, then you could come up the hill.
So every night he would turn that light on, so slaves across the river
could see across the
could
river.
see,
Right, yeah.
and his house stood where? Right underneath the North Star.
Right underneath the North Star.
So if you were following the North Star, you would see that house on the hill with the light on, and you knew if you could make it to that house, you could make it to a group of people who were willing and ready to put their life on the line and help you make it to freedom. And can you even imagine what it feels like to stand on the other side of that river as a slave who has trekked from New Orleans
Right, to see that.
to
Right.
see that light underneath the North Star that you have heard so much about for so many miles? Man, I can only imagine. So after our wonderful eye-opening experience in Ripley, Ohio, Jonathan became one of my new favorite people in the world because it was pouring down raining. I was a little broken up, obviously. And Jonathan rode how many miles in the rain that day?
It's almost 60 miles.
Oh my. 60. We cheered this dude on, man.
You were a superhero, man. Because we all bailed out of that.
Yes.
Rain is coming from the side, the wind. You could barely stand up. I mean, you could barely hold your bike up. I don't know how you did it.
Devastating. And Jonathan just sat there.
I was out there cranking along. Well, I didn't do it on purpose. I mean, I didn't set out to ride in the rain that day. I just got stuck in the rain. And I was like, well, I'm already soaking wet. I might as well keep on riding.
Well, you were absolutely our hero, man.
Pulled off a lot, and you just, I don't know, just put your head down and start riding. And I was like, I'm just gonna finish this up. And,
there's been those times during our rides where one of us had to hold the torch.
Got to hold the torch, man. You guys did a great job of encouraging me to keep on going. Like, I'm not stopping now. I'm soaking wet, and just gonna keep on riding. We were going to Matt's uncle's house.
Yes,
We're trying to get to Finley. That's where we were going.
And I was a little broken up. I had been doing a lot of no-hand riding.
Right, you did a lot of no-hand riding.
22 miles.
22 miles riding with no hand. How do you do it, Doug?
I mean, here my fat butt is trying to keep up. He has no hands. You're gone. He's riding with no hands right behind you, and I'm just like, wow. It was amazing.
I beat my new record, 22 miles.
22 miles with no hands.
With no hands. It was, but it was a lot easier to do in Ohio. It was
so flat and beautiful.
Right, yeah, it was flat. That was like some of those riding through that time. Like, that was when it was really like, there was a lot of fun riding there, because that's when Monty got on the bike.
Yes.
Monty rode like
off
40 miles that day.
That was nuts.
David rode
nonstop.
in.
Everybody wanted to
Matt
ride.
rode in. Everybody was we were all kind of just like riding. The whole trip itself started coming into focus. Like, this is why we're doing this. Like, okay, fine. If you put yourself in these people's situation, like, okay, if they followed from New Orleans, getting off a ship, through a plantation, up through the deep south, and now they get here. And when Monty walked up the hill in Ripley, that his ancestors would have walked up to be free, Monty got really emotional, which made me get emotional, because Monty was like, man, this is where my people walk to go to freedom. And it was just a very emotional time. And then getting back on the bike, up through Ohio, through the pouring down rain, and it really did. It was like, the whole trip started to come together.
Yeah.
Soaking ass wet feet.
Good job out there today, man. In the rain.
In the rain. God, I've never been that fast that far on my bike, dude.
And that's why I kept saying that. Like, man, he is moving.
Unfortunately, my trip pretty much ended after that.
We get to the border, and the vehicle that you and Justin was in couldn't make it inside.
Yeah, so me and Justin didn't get across the border into Canada, just for reasons that could probably be left unsaid at this point. We just didn't get to go to Canada. So my trip ended. My Unity ride was over.
But it didn't, man. Let me
I went
tell
home,
you.
bro. Me and Justin went home, and you guys continued the torch
Yes.
in Canada.
Yes.
So that was, watching that from a distance, and I know there's some things that happened in Canada with, some car keys getting stolen. I didn't mean all them stories, but I know there's a lot of crazy stuff that happened in Canada that I wasn't even part of.
The biggest in Canada was the captain of the ship wasn't there. So we had to reorganize and go at it and figure it out as a team. But we did.
What you guys did?
So we started this trip in New Orleans, the place where, at the time, we believe slaves didn't make it free. It was devastating. We went through all these days and, cities with no signs of any Underground Railroad. And we got to Buxton and we learned about slaves that made it free from New Orleans.
Yeah, we learned about, the 33,000 that made, out of 4 million that made it, right, to Glory Land,
Yes.
Freedom Land. And the North Star, right? So they made it to Canada, and it was really cool. So the Buxton Museum is owned by descendants of the fugitive slaves, and there's, and they're still farmers today.
Still farmers.
Thousands of acres that they own.
Yes.
Vibrant city.
So a slave owner in New Orleans bought 9,000 acres in Canada. He believed that a black person could do the same thing a white person could, and his slaves were capable of doing those things. So he took, how many of his slaves, do you remember?
It was a lot.
He took some of his slaves to Canada. He put them on that 9,000 acres. He told them the way they had to build their homes, the way they had to build their roads, they had to be this way or they were going to have to go back into slavery. They built a community that is now Buxton. Toronto,
Chatham, Kent,
Buxton,
Chatham,
Toronto,
Kent,
Canada.
and
Okay.
Buxton area. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So in that it is still ongoing today, and their ancestors are doing well. They have made museums out of the churches and homes that they had, and it was beautiful. We got to go and touch a tree that I have no idea how it even has life and is still green, but it is blooming, just like the love that it exists in Buxton.
Yeah, I think what was cool, one of the cool things about the trip in Ripley, there were several trees that were called witness trees that could have been saplings at that time or trees that were around at the time of the Underground Railroad. And we saw one in Ripley, everybody wanted to show you their witness tree. But they had a beautiful witness tree that was a sapling at the time that they came there.
Yes.
And it's in the middle of wheat fields, so they won't touch it. It's sacred ground, and it's a beautiful tree.
John Rankin's witness tree was the first time that I had ever even heard of a witness tree, and that's where I started collecting bark. So I collected some bark from the John Rankin tree, and when we got to Buxton, I carried on that ritual when they told us about the plum tree. And so I asked them if I could go over and collect a piece of bark from that tree. And we all walked over together and learned that the tree was absolutely hollow. on the inside. It was so hollow that it's like, how could this tree still be standing? But not only was it still standing, it was still producing. The leaves were still green. The thing was still strong.
I think it's a pear tree.
It was a pear tree.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we left there, and then we went to a city called Oakville.
Okay.
And there we learned about the Freedom Door.
Yes.
And we learned how one of the gentlemen that owned the custom house, so that's where you went to get into Canada, you had to go to the custom house,
Yes.
and he would take a ship across to New York, and he would take cargo over, and then he would bring slaves hidden, bring them back, and we got to actually, that Freedom Door is still there, same door, same everything, and we got to touch that Freedom Door, and they knew that once they went on the other side of that door, once they opened that door, they were free.
Free man.
You know, Jonathan told me, he said, man, you need to go on this bike trip, man. You're going to see stuff you've never seen. And I saw rural areas of our country, right?
You get a whole different perspective.
I was just totally amazed. The people were amazing.
And that's what really is inspiring, that as a group of guys who, I mean, we kind of know each other, but we really don't. And then okay, now we're together, and now off we go.
And at the end of
black
this,
and white, and it's like we're all here together, and we're going to do this because that's what we set out to do together, and we're going to finish it. And that's what these trips are really inspiring to me.
Yes.
We set out to do this, and we're going to do it, and we're going to finish, and that's what we did.
We've come a long way, and we're still growing. 2017, we jumped into this thing, just trying to make a difference in the landscape that we live in. We're different. We knew that we had different perspectives, but we knew that we shared the same love for our country, and that we wanted to make the same impressions on our kids. We had our difficulties in politics, man, and we came to the conclusion that we want leaders that our kids can look up to, and if we don't have those leaders, we got to become those leaders.
These people really were very serious about what they were doing, and they really were. It really was successful. I think it's one of the most successful grassroots movements ever, because there's a lot of mythology. There's a lot of, racist mythology, of course, related to the Underground Railroad. Which is basically, and I tried in Beyond the River to smash all the myths I could to show that it was a very integrated movement. It wasn't like a bunch of white people helping, passive black people. It was just a very integrated North and South, and men and women and black and white, and everybody was focused on one challenge, and that was trusting each other.
They visit the area. But here in Ripley, there were 300.
Whoa, what?
And 29 people listed on the rolls of the abolitionists.
Wow.
Their names and address are still on file down at our public library,
That's why
which we call Underground Central. Nowhere in this United States will you find an abolitionist society anywhere near that large. Not even close.
The whole slavery conversation
They're
is
still
right
fucking
here.
around. They still don't want us
Harriet
to.
Tubman, that's what you learned about in school. Harriet Tubman, Underground Railroad. Okay, next.
Shit, yeah. This
Next.
is the damn reconciliation shit. Excuse my language.
Oh yeah, the water looks great. Yes.
David, I took a nice picture too, sir.
Come on, team.